Ancient Egypt. This land of the pharaohs has captured our imaginations for thousands of years.
It's one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known, and it's left us with some truly astonishing treasures.
I'm on the trail of 10 of the best of them. Fabulous wonders that have to be seen to be believed. Ah! From priceless hoards of gold.
That's extraordinary.
And the secrets of the afterlife.
I never thought in my life I would get to open Tutankhamun's lunchbox.
To the monumental marvels of the all-powerful pharaohs.
That is a whole lot of stone bearing down.
I'm exploring this ancient land
to take a fresh look at some of my absolute favourites. Very sexy, this. As I count down, I can't believe I'm doing this, our top 10 treasures of Egypt.
Ancient Egypt, a land ruled by pharaohs. They built the pyramids and mummified their dead in the hope of eternal life. Its most famous rulers are still household names today. Cleopatra, Tutankhamun, Ramesses the Great.
Selecting just 10 treasures from this stunning civilization is seriously tough.
But I've pulled together a top 10 countdown that reveals some of the world's most breathtaking monuments, explores deep underground to find magnificent buried tombs, and takes us behind the scenes.
Amazing!
With world-famous discoveries. First, we'll be heading to Cairo, today the capital of Egypt, for number 10 in my countdown top 10 treasures. It's a gruesome tale of a 3,000-year-old cold case, a royal assassination, and our treasure number 10, the mummified body of an almighty Egyptian king that was discovered somewhere rather surprising.
The trail starts here in the ancient city of Luxor, when some rather curious things started to appear on the antiquities market.
Incredibly valuable riches belonging to some of Egypt's most famous pharaohs, but no one knew where they were coming from. In the spring of 1881, the suspicious authorities started to make inquiries. They discovered that they were being sold by a local farmer called Abd al-Rasul. He was immediately taken in for questioning.
Under torture, Abd al-Rasul revealed the source of his treasures. He led investigators up here to this rocky cliff face overlooking the Nile Valley.
Back then, this remote location was entirely unexplored.
He led them to this spot and to a shaft in the sheer cliff face, which is now known as TT 320. The terrified suspect claimed that one of his goats had fallen down this hole and that he'd scrambled down to rescue it.
Rasul had made a remarkable discovery. When the investigators lowered themselves into the shaft, 13 meters deep, no one was prepared for what they found.
Down there were over 40 mummies. They were pharaohs and queens and other members of the royal family. And the story of how they got there is truly extraordinary.
Close on 3,000 years earlier, a priest called Pinigen discovered that robbers were raiding tombs in the Valley of the Kings and Valley of the Queens, where Egypt's pharaohs and super-rich were buried. And the robbers weren't just stealing all the tomb treasure. Pinigen realized they were taking the bodies too.
For him, this wasn't just robbery, this was desecration. This was destroying their chances of an eternal afterlife. So he knew he had to act fast.
Pinigem summoned trusted followers for a high-risk mission. To break into the tombs, steal the royal bodies, smuggle them up this mountainside, and then stash them in this shaft. They hid here, undisturbed, for close on 3,000 years, until Abd al-Rasul's goat gave away their hiding place. Today, the pharaoh mummies found in the shaft are all together in Cairo, and it's a truly extraordinary sight.
What you've got here is basically a roll call of ancient Egyptian power. Many of the great pharaohs are here. There's Seti I and Ramses the Great, and even that quick-thinking priest who rescued these bodies over 3,000 years ago.
But one particular pharaoh here is number 10 in our countdown.
Meet Ramses III.
Ramses was a man with lots of enemies. He had to fight off invading armies from the Middle East to defend Egypt.
But the real trouble came from within the kingdom. His wife, Queen Tai, wanted her son on the throne, so she hatched a plot to assassinate her husband. Now we know all about this because it's recorded on a papyrus that's now in Turin, and this historical event is known as the Harem Conspiracy. We're told that the plot failed. The conspirators were arrested and were sentenced to death. But what happened to Ramses?
The papyrus doesn't let on, and Ramses simply disappears from the history books, sparking the theory that he died of natural causes. For over a century, the mystery remained, until a few years ago, a group of forensic scientists carried out a post-mortem and subjected the dead pharaoh to a CT scan. Ahmed Samir, a curator at the Egyptian Museum, was stunned by what they found.
Is there any evidence on this mummy that tells us exactly what happened to Ramses?
Yes, after made a CT scan around his neck, we found bandages, as you can see here, and we didn't know why that bandages is a little bit thick than the other bandages. And after made a CT scan, we found that he had been assassinated by cutting his throat.
Wow. So that was definitely, so this was a mortal wound, so he couldn't have survived it?
No, he cannot survive because it's big enough to cut the neck and to make the king died within few minutes after the blood expelled out. So this is very amazing. After 3,000 of years, we revealed the secret about which way he had been assassinated.
That's the incredible thing about history, is that it's constantly changing. There are constantly new stories, new chapters being written in.
Without doubt.
But the story doesn't quite end there. In the Hoard of Mummies, there also appears to have been Ramses' son, Prince Pentawere, the man who conspired to replace his father on the throne. So now the guilty son and his murdered father, Ramses, lie side by side. The mummy of Ramses III is number 10 in my Treasures of Egypt because it reminds us that ancient Egyptians were people with real lives, full of scandals and tragedy and intrigue, and that modern science is at last allowing us to tell their incredible, sometimes gruesome stories.
Egyptian mummies are obviously humans and so have to be treated with huge respect. The mummification process was designed to give individuals immortal afterlife, and in some ways that is exactly what's happening. The mummies here are slowly revealing their secrets. so we know intimate details about how the ancient Egyptians lived, and in the case of Ramses III, exactly how he died.
Next in our countdown, it's number 9. A brilliant discovery that brought a dead language back to life and helped us to decode the secrets of this ancient civilization. So far in our top 10 countdown, at number 10, we've met the mummy of Ramses III, the brutally murdered pharaoh. And now we're exploring the Nile Delta, where the Great River Nile meets the Mediterranean Sea, in search of number 9 in our countdown of great Egyptian treasures.
The story starts here, with the discovery of a modest bit of stone that's probably the best-known stone fragment in human history, the Rosetta Stone.
This slab of rock is just 3.5 feet tall, but the intricate writing on it has given us a key to unlock the secrets of ancient Egypt.
In 1799, it was discovered here at this fort that protects the town of Rashid. It was better known back then as Rosetta.
This fort was on the front line of a power struggle for Egypt between the British, the French, and the Turks of the vast Ottoman Empire.
A small French garrison was based here, and they received reports that an Ottoman army had landed just 20 miles up the coast. This fort was all there was that stood between the attackers and the glittering city of Rosetta, and so soldiers and military engineers immediately set to try to repair these dilapidated walls. As they were working, one French officer noticed that a number of the stones in the fort had carvings on. You can still see some here, but there was one particular one that caught his eye.
It was a stone covered in Egyptian hieroglyphs, but that's not all. Underneath, there was what seemed to be a translation in ancient Greek. It was incredibly tantalizing. Egyptian hieroglyphs had been a total mystery for 1,500 years. The Greek translation could help decode this lost language. But before they could make a start on the translation, the French suffered a shattering defeat. And the precious stone fell into the hands of the victorious British Army. Shipped back to London, it ended up at the British Museum. International experts got to work, desperate to decode Egypt's hieroglyphs and to explore ancient Egypt's secrets.
So what you're looking at here are two languages. There are ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs at the top and Greek at the bottom, and in the middle there's a kind of street form of ancient Egyptian.
The experts began by looking at the Greek, which they could still read, and they found the word Ptolemy, which they knew was a pharaoh's name. The challenge was to find the ancient Egyptian equivalent.
What they did was they looked in the hieroglyphs to try to find a cartouche. It's a bullet-shaped thing, and inside, that's where the pharaoh's name was always written.
This was the very first word they were able to read in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. The first step in deciphering a language that had been dead for 1,500 years.
So down here, you've got the name Ptolemy in Greek, and then up here is the name Ptolemy in ancient Egyptian, but this is how they managed to decode it. So what you have is a square that stands for a P, a semicircle for a T, that kind of rope shape is an O, the lion is an L, underneath here you've got an M, and then these two reeds are a Y. So slowly, it meant that they could start to piece together an ancient Egyptian alphabet, and that meant they could suddenly translate ancient Egyptian.
A dead language had been brought back to life, and ancient Egypt's temple walls, Tombs, scrolls and treasures, all of them covered in hieroglyphs, could suddenly speak to us once again. For the first time, we discovered intimate secrets of the pharaohs. We could learn about murders and love affairs that shaped the story of the world. But we also heard about the ordinary people who built these monuments and painted these walls.
Suddenly, ancient Egypt was filled with real people and their real voices.
And our understanding of how the ancient Egyptians lived and loved and fought and died was completely revolutionised.
The Rosetta Stone is possibly not the most beautiful or spectacular of our treasures, but arguably it is the most important. Writing was power in ancient Egypt, so by being able to read the ancient Egyptians' words, we can really understand the lives of not just the great and the good, but also ordinary women and men on the street. And that is why it deserves to be in our list of top 10 treasures.
Rediscovering how to read hieroglyphs transformed our relationship with ancient Egypt. The walls of temples and tombs became like the pages of a book, packed with myths and fabulous history. And next, we're going to investigate a lost treasure that was plastered in so many hieroglyphs, it took 40 years just to copy them down. When they were finally all translated, they told tales of incest and murder, and at the centre of it all, the family of Egypt's most famous queen, Cleopatra. To get there, we're travelling more than 600 miles up the River Nile to a city in Upper Egypt for treasure number 8.
Here in the middle of the 19th century, then the whole place would have looked like this. Just a very typical, bustling Egyptian market town. But if you knew where to look, you could have spotted a rather intriguing clue. Just the very tip of a massive ornamental gateway poking out of centuries worth of sand.
But this wasn't any old gateway. This was a gateway that once belonged to Queen Cleopatra. That was enough to entice explorers and treasure hunters to the town of Edfu, and they began to dig.
It took them 7 whole years to excavate this site, and if you follow me, you'll understand why. This is our next treasure, the Temple of Edfu. It is absolutely vast. It's one of the biggest temples in the whole of Egypt, and it is beautifully well preserved. I mean, it really is in the most fantastic state. There's a very particular reason for that. It was abandoned when it was relatively new, only a few hundred years or so old, and slowly it was buried in the desert sands, and then a town, you can see the remains of it up there, was built right on top of it, so its secrets were kept secure.
This splendid temple was built by a single royal family, known as the Ptolemies, who ruled Egypt from the 4th century BC until the last and most famous of the whole dynasty, Cleopatra. The entire building tells the story of the great Egyptian queen and her family through the words and pictures carved into the stone walls.
This whole gateway was built by Cleopatra's dad, Ptolemy, and you can see Ptolemy there, rather graphically shown slaying his enemies and sacrificing prisoners.
But Ptolemy's enemies weren't all outsiders. His own daughter, Cleopatra's older sister, led an armed rebellion against him, which he brutally crushed. He had her killed, leaving little Cleopatra as his heir. With a family like that, you could say that for Cleopatra, this temple wasn't a symbol of royal harmony, but a nest of snakes, as generation after generation of close family members engaged in a deadly game of intrigue, murder, and incest. Obviously, incest is illegal and taboo today, but for the pharaohs, it was completely normal. The royals believed that they had divine and pure blood that should never be contaminated by that of mere mortals. But the thing was, these incestuous relationships often caused more problems than they solved. Cleopatra's parents were probably also brother and sister, and the entire family was a vicious web of personal alliances and rivalries, a bloody ancient Egyptian soap opera. In fact, out of these 12 ancestors of Cleopatra, every single one was in an incestuous marriage, and at least 7 came to a sticky end. So when Cleopatra herself came to the throne in 51 BC, she inherited a tricky family legacy, to say the least. But also this stunning temple, a family power base. In its heyday, this place would have been an absolute riot of colour. We're told there were flagpoles outside that were 130 foot high, made of cedars of Lebanon, with flags fluttering on the top, and that many of the surfaces were decorated with polished copper. And I can't help but imagine what it would have been like if Cleopatra had walked through here. There was an aviary where falcons were bred, and a perfume factory filling the air with gorgeous scents. Oh my God, it must have been the most incredible sight. But behind all that sensuous glory, the gruesome soap opera continued. Cleopatra's main rival to the throne was her own husband, Ptolemy XIII, who was also, true to form, her younger brother. They started off as co-rulers of Egypt, but their sibling rivalry soon broke out into open warfare. Cleopatra finally won out, but only with the help of a certain Roman general called Julius Caesar. These two were the power couple of the ancient world, and the result of their liaison is hidden just over here. This is the god Horus in the form of a giant falcon, but we're not actually interested in this huge bird. It's this little guy down here who tells a fascinating story. This is almost certainly Caesarion, who was a son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, and a product of their celebrated love affair. When the boy was just 3 years old, his father, Julius Caesar, was assassinated. Cleopatra tried to survive by getting into bed with other Roman generals, but even Egypt wasn't a match for Rome's power. Soon, Emperor Augustus would overthrow her kingdom to become the first Roman ruler of Egypt. In despair, Cleopatra took her own life. Now no one was safe, not even her son. Caesarion was another who met a violent end. Augustus's assassins pursued him to Alexandria, where they strangled him to death. The age of Egypt's true pharaohs was over, and Rome had tightened its grip on this glorious civilization. The temple at Edfu is in our list of top 10 treasures, not just because it's so super impressive, but because it holds the family secrets of one of the most powerful women in history, and clues to the blood-soaked end of the great Egyptian civilization. Coming up, we reach number 7 in our countdown, one of the most iconic and mysterious monuments in all of ancient Egypt. I'm in search of my top 10 treasures. revealing the secrets of my favourite wonders of ancient Egypt. And there's still so much more to come. Just outside Egypt's capital, Cairo, is one of the most famous treasures in Egypt. It's our treasure number 7.
It's over 240 feet long and 70 feet high. Part lion, part man, it radiates mystery. At number 7 on our list of treasures, it's the Great Sphinx at Giza.
The Sphinx crouches at the entrance to one of the busiest tourist sites in the world, the Giza Plateau, famous for its mind-blowingly huge pyramids. But even in this epic setting, the Sphinx is a showstopper.
I always find the sheer scale of this incredible creature absolutely jaw-dropping. It was the biggest sculpture made in ancient Egypt, and it's still one of the largest anywhere in the world.
But that wasn't obvious when explorers first encountered the Sphinx. The giant statue was buried neck-deep in sand. All they could see poking out was an enormous stone head. But they were mystified. But once they cleared the sands, they could appreciate the Sphinx in all its crazy glory. A human head and shoulders on the body of a lion, taller than a 6-story building. The Sphinx was built on such a massive scale because it had an incredibly important job to do. Basically, to be a giant guard dog, carved out of the rock to keep watch over the pharaoh buried in the pyramid behind. Egyptologist Claire Mallison loves this incredible sculpture.
For us, it's very weird that this is half animal, half human, but this would have been completely normal in the minds of the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, absolutely. The Sphinx with the lion's body, the pharaoh is taking on board the attributes of a lion. The fearsomeness, the awesomeness, the strength of the lion in himself.
Why do you think we should care about this monument? What does the Sphinx tell you about the ancient Egyptians?
It really encapsulates the ambition of the ancient Egyptians.
They certainly never did anything by half.
No, not at all.
Generations of ancient Egyptians came to respect and fear this otherworldly creature, really believing that it had supernatural powers. And the fascination with the Sphinx shows no sign of letting up. Archaeologists are investigating under the statue because there are tantalizing clues that the Sphinx sits right on top of an ancient network of chambers and tunnels. Usually hidden from view, a deep hole near the Sphinx's tail is thought to be connected with a large chamber beyond.
And there's actually another smaller one right at the front underneath the paws. The truth is, we have absolutely no idea what these were used for, but it's a mystery that researchers are currently trying to solve.
And some are hopeful that these hidden tunnels may lead us to new, undiscovered treasures.
The Sphinx deserves to be on our countdown of top 10 treasures because it has such an incredible life story. It starts out basically as a monumental guard dog watching over a pharaoh's tomb. It comes to be worshipped as a god with supernatural powers, and now it's a guardian of ancient Egypt's secrets.
To get to my next treasure, you need to travel hundreds of miles from Giza, across the Egyptian desert. All the way beyond Egypt's far-flung southern border. But it's a journey that's worth every moment to reach number 6 in our countdown of top 10 treasures.
It's a wild, remote landscape here, and you'd be forgiven for thinking there's not much to write home about. I mean, certainly nothing on the scale of the monuments that we've already seen. But actually, beyond the desert here, there is something truly spectacular. It's the most extraordinary place with an extraordinary story, because it was built not once, but twice. When you finally get here to Abu Simbel, it is impossible not to be awestruck. This temple was built by Ramses II, probably the greatest of all Egyptian pharaohs. He ruled for an astonishing 66 years, one of the longest reigns in history. And boy, he loved to build. This whole temple is a monument to his reign, and out here, beyond the southern border, he's also giving a powerful warning to the neighbours. There's just one overriding message to this temple. It's saying, I'm in charge, don't mess with me. This is Ramses' ego built in stone, and it has left us with the most awe-inspiring place. The temple walls are covered with ferocious images of the pharaoh defeating his enemies. But there are actually two temples here at Abu Simbel, and I've got a particular soft spot for the other one. Let me show you why. The second temple here reveals another, much more gentle side of Ramses. It was built in honour of his favourite wife, Nefertari. Nefertari actually means beautiful companion. Ramses described her as the woman for whom the sun rises, and he built this temple, this divine abode, for the wife whom he loves. Nefertari's story is one of the reasons that I really love this place. It is one of my very favourite sites. But at one point, there was a real possibility that all of this was going to be lost. You'd be forgiven for thinking these giant statues have stood here for thousands of years, but you'd be wrong. Today, Abu Simbel stands beside one of the largest man-made lakes in the world, Lake Nasser. In the 1960s, the government launched a plan to build a giant dam to create the enormous lake. But there was a problem. The thousands of square miles of land to be flooded included the site of these temples. If Ramses' temples were to survive, they would have to be moved. So a team of archaeologists and engineers worked against the clock to dismantle the temples and transport them 200 metres to safety on higher ground. There, they painstakingly reassembled them, block by block. It took 4 whole years. But there was another challenge. In their original site, the temples were built into the side of a mountain. So the engineers didn't just have to move the temples, they had to build a new mountain. Today, a nondescript door in the side of the hill is the only outward clue to this amazing achievement. As a historian, I'm used to investigating hidden doorways, but I'm promised something particularly special in here. Thanks to Abdelmanem Saeed, the regional director of antiquities, I'm getting rare access to this extraordinary place, deep inside the Temple Mountain. Amazing. That's extraordinary. And can we get further up?
Why not?
Oh, I love it.
Same
I
here.
love why not.
What looks from the outside like a desert mountain turns out on the inside to be completely hollow. This hollow dome is so big, you could stack 5 double-decker buses underneath it.
That is remarkable.
Have a look from here.
Because when you're inside, you've got absolutely no idea. You come here, and it's this kind of futuristic construction.
You never feel at all when you are inside the Great Temple, that temple was moved,
Yeah.
that temple was cut,
No.
or that was a man-made concrete dome.
Amazing. What an enormous project. It must, I'll tell you what I love about it. Ramses never did anything by halves. He liked his projects to be big. What do you think Ramses II would think of all of this?
When he could hear about something huge like that, I'm sure that he could be happy more and more.
Yeah, exactly. I think he'd definitely approve of the scale. So this should be called the Ramses Dome.
Nowadays, yes. Nowadays, yes.
Ramses Great Dome. It's amazing. Honestly, thank you so much for bringing me in here. This is a real privilege to be here. It's the future helping the past, isn't it?
Exactly.
Abu Simbel is one of my top treasures of Egypt and deserves to be on our countdown. It was truly remarkable when it was first built, and then its move and its rebuild makes it double extraordinary. This place is a testament to the power of human ingenuity right across the centuries.
Coming up in our countdown of Egypt's top 10 treasures, we reach my top 5. And I finally get to meet the most famous Egyptian of all time. There are still so many delights to come in my top 10 treasures of Egypt. So far we've met the 3,000-year-old mummy of murdered pharaoh Ramses III.
So that was definitely, so this was a mortal wound, so he couldn't have survived it.
That's true.
At number 9, the code-breaking Rosetta Stone. And 8, the fabulous Temple of Edfu.
Oh my God, it must have been the most incredible sight.
In at 7, the Great Sphinx, guardian of Egypt's secrets. And at 6, the temples of Abu Simbel, built to glorify Ramses and his beloved wife. My next treasure is truly spectacular, but it hides a deathly secret. In the punishing desert on the edge of Cairo, number 5 in our countdown. It's an Egyptian city of the dead.
This is the incredible site of Saqqara, and the whole place is an archaeological treasure trove. It's dominated by that brilliant building, the Step Pyramid.
It might not look that impressive now, but appearances are deceptive. The Step Pyramid is revolutionary, one of the earliest surviving monuments in all of Egypt, and the world's first ever pyramid. 150 years older than the Sphinx and the famous Great Pyramid at Giza.
And it's also the world's first stone-cut building. But it's not what's above ground that gets Saqqara onto our list of treasures, but what lies underneath my feet. Because down here, there is a whole subterranean world. And not only that, but here there are thousands, possibly millions, of mummified bodies.
This is the final resting place for 16 of Egypt's earliest pharaohs. But it was also a graveyard for queens and nobles and ordinary Egyptians for 3,000 years. So many mummies were buried here that Saqqara became Egypt's biggest city of the dead, stretching over 4 square miles. All these mummies are remarkable enough, but archaeologists have also discovered something else. There aren't just humans hidden here. But animals, too, in numbers that beg a belief. 8 million mummified dogs in one mass grave. 4 million ibis birds in another. The necropolis was also home to cats, baboons, crocodiles, fish, and some, well, it's anyone's guess. People mummified and buried these animals as gifts to the gods, hoping their prayers would be answered in return. And there's one particular tomb here, hiding something really extraordinary, which for me beats the bizarreness of everything else. When it first came to light 150 years ago, it was a sensational find.
In the middle of the 19th century, the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette discovered a rather promising clue. It was a sphinx buried in the sand.
Intrigued, he and his team began to dig, and soon they found a second sphinx, and then a third, until there were over 100 sphinxes lined up along a grand roadway,
All leading to this spot here.
Mariette spent months clearing the path, packing the sphinxes off to Paris, and on the 12th of November 1851, he finally reached a mysterious subterranean entrance.
Now, that was all pretty exciting, but nothing could prepare him for what was down here.
The sphinxes had led him to a labyrinth of underground passages carved deep into the rock.
Just imagine what it would have been like to have been the first to explore down here, when all you had were flaming torches or lamplight and no idea what was round the next corner.
There are hundreds of meters of tunnels, built to create something incredible.
This is an underground palace, and it's no ordinary palace. This is a palace of the dead. What you're looking at here is the most enormous coffin. It's made of solid granite, and together this weighs around 90 tons. So you have to ask yourself, what creature would be buried in something like this?
The archaeologists had never seen anything like this before, and were desperate to find out what was hiding inside.
All of the coffins had been robbed, but then they realised there was just one intact. The team used dynamite to open it up, and what they discovered inside was a massive, mummified bull.
They realised that the ancient Egyptians had built these huge coffins, and this entire site as an underground cemetery for enormous, prized bulls. The bulls were worshipped by the ancient Egyptians, who thought that they were supernatural beings with magical powers. While alive, each bull was treated to a 5-star lifestyle.
It was given a special diet and even had its own harem of cows. And in death, it was buried with all the pomp and circumstance of a pharaoh.
In total, there are 24 of these monstrous stone coffins. Just think of the superhuman effort to get them all down here. And with only a fraction of Saqqara's City of the Dead excavated so far, who knows what might be discovered next?
The site at Saqqara is brilliantly rich and beautifully bizarre, and that's why it's one of our top 10 treasures. This was a place where the world of the dead was as important as the world of the living. And it's a fantastic reminder that although the ancient Egyptians are very like us, they often did things that are frankly completely weird. And that's why I love it and them.
From a city of the dead to a city full of life. Next, let's go to one of the most famous places in Egypt, an ancient city on the banks of the Nile, to discover treasure number 4. Over 4,000 years ago, the pharaohs raised a new capital here next to the mighty river. It grew to become one of the biggest and most magnificent cities in the world. Today, it's known as Luxor.
As the beating heart of their capital, they built 2 new temples. The Temple of Karnak down there, and then connected by this amazing ceremonial avenue that runs 1.5 miles long and is lined with sphinxes. Up here, the Temple of Luxor.
The complex was huge, twice the size of St Paul's in London. About the same length as 3 football pitches laid end to end. It was so much more than just a temple.
This was the place in Luxor, the kind of capital of the capital, the engine of the ancient Egyptian world.
For centuries, this was one of Egypt's most splendid temples. But if you're imagining somewhere silent and serious, think again. This was party central.
The really brilliant thing about this place isn't just its architectural splendour, but the fact that it would have been absolutely pulsing with life. So here you've had priests with their heads and their bodies shaved, and all these columns, you can see some of the traces there, they'd have been absolutely bright with a kind of riot of colour. And then when you came out into the courtyards, there were plates of electrum, which was a mixture of gold and silver, that would have reflected back the sun's rays, so it would kind of ricochet out as an extraordinary light show.
During festivals, Luxor was the ultimate party venue. All of life was here, indulging in wild, drunken blowouts. Singers, magicians and dancers, like these gorgeous back-flipping acrobats. So what better place than Luxor for the pharaohs of Egypt to boast about their potency? For the Egyptians, power and sexual power were closely linked, and 3 pharaohs used this temple to show off about both.
The first of these rulers was Amenhotep, who was the original builder of this temple. And there's a rather startling clue as to how he cemented his hold on power deep inside the complex.
To boost his claim to the throne, Amenhotep claimed that his mum had had sex with an Egyptian god, and that he was the result. And he had that juicy story recorded right here on the walls. Archaeologist Minna Mangela is going to reveal how the ancient Egyptians showed the pharaoh's mum making love with a god.
In this scene here, you get to see Amun-Re, the god of all the gods. Here he touches her hand gently.
Yes.
And down here, their crossing legs symbolize the making of the love.
The ancient Egyptians were very good at just accepting the fact that making love is a gorgeous thing.
Absolutely.
The second of our pharaohs to use this temple to show off about his potency was the most powerful man in Egyptian history, Ramses the Great. He was the ambitious builder pharaoh who we've met once already at the Temple of Abu Simbel. Ramses was another ruler who wasn't shy of boasting about fertility. He claimed to have fathered at least 100 children and rarely missed an opportunity to erect a monument to his manliness.
He absolutely left his mark on this temple. He put statues of himself everywhere, and he built this monumental gateway and set up 2 giant obelisks, although there's only one left now.
Another almost identical obelisk stood just here for more than 3,000 years. But in 1832, it was presented as a gift by the ruler of Egypt to the King of France. The 250-ton, 75-foot-tall pillar made its way by sea all the way to Paris, where today it stands as the centerpiece of the Place de la Concorde in the center of the French capital. But the story of Luxor Temple doesn't end there. 1,000 years after the age of Ramses, a third great ruler of Egypt carved his story into the Temple of Luxor. He was Alexander the Great from ancient Greece, one of the most ambitious conquerors in history. Alexander invaded Egypt in 332 BC, and we're told he chose to be crowned on this spot in the heart of this mighty temple. So this is extraordinary. So this is Alexander the Great. He's one of the most powerful men on earth, and he's being represented here as an Egyptian. Even though Alexander was Greek, he was determined to portray himself as a powerful Egyptian pharaoh, and he knew that Luxor was a great place to do that. It does really tell you something about the magnetic pull of this place, that he's coming here, he's coming to this temple in Luxor.
That's right. Alexander had to choose the right place to present himself as a pharaoh, as an Egyptian pharaoh.
This place is a treasure for us, but it was obviously a treasure for them too. The Temple of Luxor makes it into our top 10 because it is such a treasure trove of experiences and stories, and because it's cast a spell over the powerful for centuries.
Coming up, we're into the top 3 of my top 10 treasures of Egypt, where I'll be going deep underground into ancient tombs.
Oh, God.
And getting special access to the most spectacular archaeological find in history.
Amazing!
We're now down to the final 3 of my top 10 treasures of Egypt. We've already experienced some astonishing discoveries. The mummy of a murdered pharaoh, the code-breaking Rosetta Stone, the Great Sphinx of Giza, and the spectacular temples of Abu Simbel, built by the all-powerful pharaoh Ramses. This time, we're leaving behind the great cities and heading into rocky mountains not far from Luxor for treasure number 3. At first glance, this place seems rugged and remote, but I'm tracking an old route to one of the most legendary locations in all of Egypt.
These paths haven't changed for thousands of years, and they were used in the ancient times. A whole host of people would have come down here. There'd have been craftsmen and traders and builders and even pharaohs.
They came here to build something very special among the mountains, in strict secrecy.
Where they were heading, they called the Place of Truth, or the Great Necropolis of millions of years of the pharaohs. And it's number 3 on our list of top treasures. Today, we simply describe it as the Valley of the Kings.
From around 1600 BC, the mummified bodies of pharaohs were brought here to be buried in tombs cut into the steep sides of the valley.
This might seem like a rather remote, random patch of desert to bury some of the most influential and powerful people on Earth. But actually, this place has huge symbolic and practical significance. You can probably see that the sun's just risen over there behind me in Luxor, which means that it's set here behind these mountains. And that really mattered to the ancient Egyptians, because this was where your mortal life ended and your journey into the afterlife began.
Hidden within this rocky terrain are 63 tombs, and they're just the ones we've found so far. They include the tombs of the most famous pharaohs in Egyptian history: Tutankhamun, the boy king; Ramses the Great, builder of Abu Simbel; and our royal assassination victim, Ramses III. But the grandest tomb of all belonged to Pharaoh Seti I, and that's the one I want to show you now.
Seti was the father of our old friend Ramses II, Ramses the Great, and he was a hugely successful pharaoh, and his tomb is suitably magnificent.
For years, the tomb's been closed to make it safe for visitors. Now, I'm being given special access to this spectacular resting place by archaeologist Bahar Gaber.
Gosh, I can already tell this is going really, really deep down.
It's a very long tomb. It's about 138 meters.
This is the largest, deepest, most lavish tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Not surprising, perhaps, since Seti I was one of the most powerful men on Earth.
I mean, it is incredible, because everywhere you look, there's a decoration, there's painting, there's inscription. It's a huge amount of information, actually, that's being given here.
And even the columns here, you will see that have a beautiful decoration representing the king with the different gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
That's Horus, the god, the son of Isis and Osiris. Yeah. And look at the relation between the king and the god itself. He dreamed one day that he will be alive again with the god Osiris.
Yeah. You know, that's why these places are so important, because people talk about the Egyptians being obsessed with death, and they're not. They're obsessed with continuing their life, only it's happening in an afterlife.
When they decided to build a tomb, they cut the tomb out of the rock to live forever. So he dreamed that his second life would be here. All the inscription, all these beautiful details talk about food, drinks. Oh, wow. He said, I will live here in my paradise.
I love that. I love the idea that this is an underground paradise here.
Yes, yeah.
As we enter deeper into the tomb, there are even more marvels inside Seti I's burial chamber.
Look at that.
Look at this. It's extraordinary down here.
Yes.
That is incredible. It's just like a riot of colour and images, isn't it?
Yeah.
When explorer adventurers first discovered this tomb in 1817, they were blown away by these paintings. So fresh and vivid, they said, as if they'd been drawn yesterday. They even found paint pots and brushes lying on the floor. And what's extra exciting about the Valley of the Kings is that there's still more waiting to be discovered. Do you know, we think that we found less than half of what was buried here.
We're working here on this beautiful mountain, inside the tombs, outside the tombs, expecting every day that we'll find something.
Please ring me.
Of course.
When you do, let me be the first to be there, because it's brilliant, because there are all these treasures that we know about, and these treasures that are waiting to be discovered.
Sadly, some treasures will never be found, including the priceless possessions of Seti I that once crammed this tomb. They were all looted across thousands of years by tomb raiders. Robbers were a key reason Egyptians began to bury their rulers in this remote location.
Up until now, pharaohs had been buried in great big pyramids, a bit like the step pyramid that we saw at Saqqara. These were fantastic demonstrations of their might and their power, but they were also huge signs saying that treasure was buried there, so they were incredibly tempting for robbers and raiders.
And that's why the ancient Egyptians began to bury their kings far from prying eyes in this valley. So remote, they hoped it would keep them and their tombs safe forever. But the robbers weren't put off, even though they risked being brutally punished, sometimes executed. And we know all about this ancient tomb raiding from an amazing source. 3,000-year-old court records. This scroll contains the confession of a tomb robber who'd been caught and reveals the trade secrets of these ancient criminals.
We know that gold and silver was often nicked first, obviously because it was the most precious, but also because it was very easy to melt down. Then you had perfumes and textiles going, which could command a really high price on the market. And then finally, the big objects like chariots and bits of furniture, they were left, but eventually, even they were nicked.
It was a constant fight between the tomb builders, officially keeping the thieves out, and the tomb raiders, desperate to break in. And there's one tomb in the valley where you can really see how that battle played out.
Just up here on the cliff face is the entrance to the tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose III. Obviously, in ancient times, this handy staircase wasn't there, so even if you knew where the entrance was, it would have been really, really tricky to get to.
And this was just the start of the measures they took to keep Thutmose III and his treasure safe. Bahar's given me special privileged access and has agreed to show me what lay in store for would-be thieves.
Thank you for making the climb.
Oh, it's a long way.
It's a long way, but great to get here.
We're now following in the footsteps of ancient tomb robbers. Those robbers came here 3,500 years ago, trying to reach the gold, the jewels, and unique treasures buried here with the pharaoh. But deeper in, the thieves found a trap straight out of Indiana Jones.
Wow.
The passageway comes to a sudden end above a deep, dangerous pit.
How far down does it go down here?
It's about 6 meters.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, so it is. So that's a sheer drop down there.
This room would have seemed to be a dead end, but across the pit, the rest of the tomb lay hidden behind a false wall until it was smashed open by ancient tomb raiders.
That decoration would originally gone just all the way along the wall.
Yeah, you can see the remains here.
Yeah. So you'd arrive here, you'd think that that was just, you know, it'd be impossible to get across. Obviously, there wasn't a walkway here originally. So how did they work out that you could actually hack through an entrance up there? How did they find that entrance?
They tested the whole walls, and actually they found it's just plaster.
So they would have been tapping on the walls there
Right.
to see if it sounded
Right.
different. Okay, but what lies beyond that?
The most sacred part of the tomb, the burial chamber, when we will have the mummy of the king.
Okay. Can we get in there?
Of course. Let's go.
After you.
Yeah. Just be careful.
Okay. It's getting much hotter, isn't it? Actually,
The tomb designers used every trick they could think of to deter the thieves.
Is this the burial chamber now?
No, this is just a colored room, and then we have the burial chamber, the next one.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's like a concealed staircase.
Yeah, this area was covered when the thieves entered to the tomb.
Yeah.
Watch your heads.
Okay. He really, really doesn't want to be found, Thutmose, does he?
Finally, we have the burial chamber of the King Thutmose III.
Okay. So you've got to have put in a real effort to get this far if you're a robber. It's beautiful. Look at that ceiling. That's so lovely, isn't it?
And because the king actually died suddenly, so most of the tomb unfinished. But look at that one.
These simple sketches show the pharaoh standing alongside one of his daughters and 3 of his wives. I just love these images. They feel as though the artist's brushes have just left the stone.
You know, it's so moving seeing these sketches because you really get a sense of the ordinary men and sometimes women who would have made these. I mean, that's an incredible thing.
Tragically, the dead ends and false floors weren't enough to fool the thieves, who looted all the fantastic treasures that once filled this tomb.
Amazing!
But this treasure was just too heavy to shift. The stone sarcophagus, which once contained the mummified remains of Tutmosis III.
What's it made of?
It's actually quartzite.
Was his body inside?
The whole tomb had been attacked by the thieves and the tomb robbers.
Yeah.
For our good luck, we found the mummy.
Tutmosis III was one of the mummies recovered from that shaft in the desert, alongside number 10 in our countdown, the mummy of Pharaoh Ramses III. Today, he rests with the others in Cairo. So the robbers didn't make off with quite everything. And for sure, there are many more treasures still buried here, just waiting to be discovered.
The Valley of the Kings makes it into my top 3 because there is nowhere else like it on Earth. You've got these incredibly rich tombs in this beautiful, wild landscape. And although in theory what happens here is all about death, it actually feels like a celebration of life.
But there was one tomb in the Valley of the Kings that did escape the attention of the tomb robbers. What they found inside astonished the world, and it's our treasure number 2. I'm counting down my top 10 treasures of Egypt. It's been a really hard job sticking to just 10 because ancient Egyptians have left us with so many astonishing treasures. From vast stone monuments to the mummified remains of powerful kings. But there is one treasure that was always going to be as near as damn it the top of the list. We're staying right here in the Valley of the Kings for treasure number 2.
From the outside, this looks pretty much like any other tomb in the Valley of the Kings. But for thousands of years, it was kept buried and secret. And it's what's inside that makes this number 2 on our top 10 treasures of Egypt.
When this tomb was first opened in 1922 by the English archaeologist Howard Carter, very few had heard of the pharaoh whose body lay inside. But he was soon to become a household name, Tutankhamun. And that was because, unlike the other tombs in the valley, this tomb's treasures had been kept safe from thieves. And what fabulous treasures they are. This is one of 3 spectacular gold coffins found here, each lying inside the other like Russian dolls. The outer 2 were made of wood covered in gold, but the inner one was solid gold, weighing 100 kilos. Today, that gold alone would be worth over £3 million.
Getting up this close, you really understand why they used gold to make these amazing coffins. Because the idea was that covered in gold, the gods would realise that these pharaohs, these god men, were actually divine.
And inside the inner gold coffin lay the body of the pharaoh.
So here he is. This is the mummified body of the teenager Tutankhamun.
I really feel for him. He looks so fragile. Mind you, he's the only mummy in the entire valley still in his original tomb, lying all alone in an empty chamber.
But originally, the rooms of this tomb were jam-packed with what Carter described as wonderful things. Pharaohs were buried with hundreds, often thousands, of their precious and personal objects. So things like weapons and beds and jewellery and food and sort of packed lunches. Some of them even took with them their favourite pets who'd been mummified. So it was everything you could possibly need for your journey to the afterlife.
When Carter and his team first entered Tutankhamun's tomb, they took these photographs. The chambers were stacked to the ceiling with royal treasure. This was the greatest archaeological find of all time. But to see this world-famous collection today, we need to travel to Giza on the outskirts of Cairo, where the treasures of Tutankhamun are being brought together once more in a brand new museum. I can't tell you how lucky I am to have been given special behind-the-scenes access.
Amazing.
Amazing!
Yes.
Amazing! And you're working on it right now?
Yes, our colleague here working in conservation of this bed.
That's really delicate work, isn't it?
Dedicated work, yes.
Incredible.
Any one of these artifacts on their own would be a priceless treasure. 4,000 of them altogether is hard to get your head round. Today, conservation work is taking place to make sure every precious piece is ready for the museum's display. Many show signs of use, quite possibly by Tutankhamun himself.
It's so beautiful. Do you think this would have been for kind of processions and ceremonies, this one?
Yes,
Yeah.
he used it.
Look at that, the detail is amazing, isn't it? It's so fine, the work. This gold. I think they thought it was like the sweat
Yes.
of the sun god.
Sun, yes.
So it was magical. They thought gold was magical, and the fact it didn't tarnish in the ground.
The boy king was buried with a dizzying array of treasures. All, don't forget, close on 3,500 years old. Gilded furniture and no fewer than 6 fully functioning chariots.
So I don't know if you can see this. That looks like this would definitely have been used, this chariot, because the wood is slightly worn here, and that would be in the kind of friction from the wheels as it was going around. Oh my God. So imagine Tutankhamun could have been in this chariot going out on a hunt to prove his power to his people.
Alongside these glittering treasures were also hundreds of personal items that Tut would need in the afterlife. Dr. Isa Zidan has agreed to show me some of them.
This is the first time I've seen these outside glass. This is so extraordinary. I've got to put my glasses on to see it, because it's just, I mean, my head is spinning with this, because, I mean, I've read so much about these things, but just look at the detail on that.
This is glass, kind of the glass,
Yeah.
and this is also sheet of gold.
It's all coming to focus. So this incredible head, which is a big cat, is it a leopard or something? This is the face.
Yes.
Because there are images of Tut, and he would have worn a leopard skin, I think.
Yes, you are right.
Yeah. It's so beautiful, and he wasn't even a
All
particularly
collection
special
of King
pharaoh.
Tut, very, very beautiful.
It's very beautiful.
The pharaoh was also buried with more practical items for the afterlife.
Day
Okay,
beds.
this is 2 beds, but we're thinking that King Tut used it during his life.
Gosh. So he would have just had a rest here or a nap in the middle of the day.
I have about 10 beds.
Quite right, he had 10 beds. You know, he's the pharaoh of Egypt, after all.
And this also
Yeah.
unique artifact of the collection of King Tut. This was founded in treasure room.
Do you know what that would have been used for?
It means give power after life.
Okay.
Okay.
The king was even provided with ready meals.
So this is like a box for a roast chicken.
Yes.
God,
You see?
yeah. It looks like there's definitely something else organic in there, isn't there? I never thought in my life I would get to open Tutankhamun's lunchbox.
Some of this stuff was clearly really personal.
And this is the toys of King Tut, which he used during he was young.
So his actual toys?
Yes, yes.
That's just so touching. His courtiers, or he might even have asked for them to be buried with him for the afterlife. That's amazing.
To everyone's surprise, they found well over 100 walking sticks in the tomb, supporting theories that Tutankhamun had some form of disability. One of the items in Carter's original photographs was this enigmatic box. But we now know this treasure didn't belong to the pharaoh.
This is the cartouche of his wife.
Yes. So we know that this belonged to Tutankhamun's wife. So it's the only artifact of hers that exists. It looks like it's 100 years old, or 10 years old. It's true.
10 years old.
Totally true. Do you know what it would have been used for? Oh, look at that. Look at that.
Maybe for keeping her clothes.
I think it looks like a linen chest. It looks exactly like a linen chest today.
Linen
yes.
clothes inside it.
Can you open it? Can you open it?
Okay.
There's a box that's never been filmed before being opened, and the doctor has just offered to open it for us.
Now we'll open the box
Okay.
to see what inside this box.
Okay.
Sadly, the box is empty.
Oh, you can smell it though, can't you? You can smell the wood
Can smell as
and the resin.
the wood.
A little bit of
The
resin.
history, not so wood. The history.
What a romantic. You can smell it's empty, but you can smell the history coming out of it. Oh, wow. It still is the most remarkable thing, and it's tantalizing us with its secrets. It's not letting us know why it was put in the tomb. But I like that. I like
Maybe
it
in
when
the future
history...
we'll know the secret.
Actually,
The greatest and most famous treasure of all wasn't discovered until 1925, 3 years after Howard Carter first entered the tomb of Tutankhamun. Once he removed the lid from Tut's third and final coffin, Carter came face to face with something truly extraordinary. And that, today, takes pride of place in Cairo's Central Museum.
I'd say it's the most famous ancient treasure anywhere in the world. It's the mask of Tutankhamun.
The mask is pure gold, decorated with coloured glass and precious stones, and weighs more than 10 kilos. On his forehead are a cobra and a vulture, symbols of royal authority.
I remember first seeing this mask when I was just 5 at the amazing Blockbuster exhibition at the British Museum, and being completely blown away because suddenly all those fairy tales and myths about hidden tombs and boy kings buried with gold and secret mysterious deaths, they were true. They were staring back out at me. And it's just beautiful, isn't it? I mean, this truly is the most extraordinary treasure.
Today, Tutankhamun is a global megastar and the museum's top attraction.
The Tutankhamun collection is number 2 on our list of treasures, not just because it's so exquisite and so remarkable, but for another deeper reason too. Howard Carter's discovery of that tomb launched ancient Egypt into the mainstream and sparked a global passion for all things Egyptian. You could argue that if Tut had stayed buried, then many of these people wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be a historian, and you might not be watching this show.
Coming up, I get privileged access to one of the world's most famous monuments. Number 1 in our top 10 treasures of Egypt.
Oh, God.
It's been an epic journey through our top 10 treasures of Egypt. First, at number 10, we had the mummy of Ramses III, the pharaoh murdered by assassins. At number 9, the famous Rosetta Stone, which gave us the knowledge to decode Egypt's hieroglyphs. Number 8, the massive Temple of Edfu, built by the incestuous family of Cleopatra. And number 7, we came face to face with the Great Sphinx of Giza. At number 6, Ramses the Great's colossal temples at Abu Simbel, rescued from oblivion. At number 5, we explored the city of the dead at Saqqara, home to millions of mummies. And at number 4, the beating heart of ancient Egypt, the Temple of Luxor. At number 3, we investigated the world's greatest burial ground, the Valley of the Kings. At number 2, we got up close and personal with the unforgettable treasures of Tutankhamun. Now it's time to finally reveal number 1 in our top 10 countdown of Egypt's brilliant treasures. We're going back to Giza on the outskirts of Cairo for an Egyptian treasure that never fails to impress.
Number 1 on our countdown of Egyptian treasures is the Great Pyramid at Giza.
Rising almost 150 meters out of the ground, it remains one of the most gobsmacking constructions in the world.
It took over 20 years to build this pyramid, and it's been estimated that each one of these blocks, which weighs between 1 and 2.5 tons each, would have been put in place every 2 minutes, every day of that 20 years.
The stone was brought from all across Egypt, including granite from more than 500 miles away in the south of the country. The entire Giza plateau would have been teeming with activity. Over 10,000 workers toiling at the greatest building site the world had ever seen. When the Great Pyramid was finally completed, it was the tallest man-made structure anywhere in the world. A record it held for 4,000 years.
However many times I come here, I find this monument completely mind-blowing. I mean, and if you just think of how that affects me now, today, and I know how it was built, how it would have impacted on the imagination of history across not just centuries, but thousands of years.
And originally, the pyramid would have looked even more imposing. Covered in polished white limestone, it would have blazed out under the desert sun.
Much of that casing was actually physically shaken off around 700 years ago, when there was a massive earthquake around here. But you can get a hint of what it would have looked like if you look at the tip of that neighbouring pyramid. So just try to imagine this landscape in its heyday. It would have gleamed out with innovation. It must almost have felt futuristic. But the mad truth about this remarkable, massive monument is that it was built to house the body of just one man.
Pharaoh Khufu. He made this one of the biggest tombs in human history to keep his body and his treasures safe for eternity.
So in order to discover the secrets that are walled up here, I've got to brave the actual interior of the pyramid.
The original entrance was sealed 4,500 years ago. After Khufu's body was placed inside, no one was ever meant to enter. So now we have to clamber in through a hole smashed open by medieval tomb robbers. And what you find inside is a labyrinth of secret passages and hidden tunnels. After twisting and turning for 30 meters, you find this steep hallway. Here, the Robbers' Tunnel meets the original access route, known as the Ascending Passage. This then opens up into an amazing stairway, the Grand Gallery. It's 8 meters high and 46 meters long, leading up to the very center of the pyramid. This was all built not just to house the pharaoh's body, but also his soul. And his spirit was thought to roam around in these tunnels and chambers. It's spooky even for me, and I don't believe in the afterlife.
So this is the king's chamber where the king was buried, and it's always been considered the beating heart of this pyramid. But by the time that modern day explorers came here in the 19th century, this room had been completely stripped of all its treasure. All that was left was this sarcophagus. But I've got access to other secret spaces within the pyramid itself.
Below the king's chamber, deep underground, under the base of the pyramid, is a little-known secret. Accessible only down this narrow, 70-meter-long tunnel, not normally open to visitors. It's one of the most eerie and unsettling places in all of Egypt.
This is where it gets really interesting because you have to crawl from here on in.
Thousands of tons of rock were dug out by hand as the pyramid was being built above ground. An incredible task in what must have been appalling conditions in this cramped tunnel.
I can't believe I'm doing this because I'm very claustrophobic. So I am doing this in the name of history. Oh God. So I've read about this place, but I've never been down here before. I've just got to adjust for a moment because we're 30 meters beneath the surface of the bedrock here, and there's 140 meters worth of pyramid above me. So that is a whole lot of stone bearing down.
No one's quite sure what this space was built for. Perhaps the king's original burial chamber, abandoned after a change of plan, or a decoy designed to fool tomb robbers looking for the real thing. Or could it just be an underground kingdom for the dead pharaoh to haunt?
What an effort it must have taken to make this, but we don't know why, we don't know what it was for. I mean, down here, there's a shaft that goes down 13 meters. No idea what they use this for. This, apart from the fact the ceiling seems to be falling in on me here. This is amazing. So, everywhere here you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of these chisel marks. And these were made by workers, probably women as well as men, well over 4,000 years ago. So, that is an amazing thing. When I touch that, I'm touching where their hands were. That is truly special. That is something I'm going to treasure.
And elsewhere in the guts of the pyramid, a brand new discovery has been made that transforms our understanding of the whole structure. At the end of this long, low passage, hidden near the base of the Grand Gallery, lies a room that is out of bounds to most visitors. It may hold the key to one of the pyramid's greatest mysteries.
Now, this is the Queen's chamber, but it's got nothing at all to do with the Queen. There was no Queen buried here. But, if anything, there's actually something even more exciting currently being stored here. And what this is scanning equipment. There's a team of international scientists who are collaborating on something called the SCANS Pyramid Project, and they are scanning the entire interior of this pyramid, and what they've discovered is truly remarkable. So directly above me, there's a whole central chamber that we knew absolutely nothing about.
The scans, taken in 2017, revealed this huge void, thought to be at least 30 meters long. It's been described as the discovery of the century.
And it is perfectly possible that stored in there is still the treasure of the pharaoh. It's just amazing.
The chamber's surrounded by meters of solid masonry, so it's unlikely that anyone will find out anytime soon. It's an archaeological riddle waiting to be solved. The new discovery is a reminder that even a monument as ancient and iconic as this Great Pyramid still has deeply hidden secrets and surprises.
The Great Pyramid at Giza deserves to be our #1 Egyptian treasure. For starters, it's the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that still stands intact. It's wowed visitors for thousands of years, and it looks set to be here for 1,000 years more.
In our top 10, we've visited fabulous tombs and stunning temples. We've cracked secret codes and witnessed gruesome murders. Ending our journey with the soaring grandeur of Khufu's Great Pyramid.
Majestic and mysterious and mind-blowing, the treasures of Egypt are proof of the power of human imagination and human achievement, and they'll still be standing long after all of us have turned to dust.